CIA had classified the facility mothballed and sealed, which in practice meant they forgot it existed after a change in budget lines, and the intern who used to file things under Nevada left for law school. Stanley wasn't bothered. He liked it here. It was quiet. Everything worked. The robots were polite. Occasionally, the internal AI would play reruns of Gilligan's Island, which he found soothing. He was, in his own way, the last warden of a forgotten frontier of American insanity. Until now. He reached for the phone. It was still wired. He dialed the emergency line, one of only 3 numbers he still remembered. "Jensen," he said. "God, you're still alive?" The voice on the other end muttered. "You mothballed the lab, not me." "What's the status?" "We've got visitors." "Agents?" "No, teenagers." Silence. "Can you contain them?" "Nope. New property owners, apparently. Legal. Transfer filed with the county. I checked. The land deed says Masters and Chains, joint custody." A sigh. Then observed. "I was planning to nap." "You can nap between disasters." "Fine." By the time the elevator opened for Raphael and Link, Stanley had switched into his janitor uniform, a decision he would later regret, and was hiding behind a wall of old soda machines, watching 2 of America's wealthiest teenagers walk into a facility that hadn't seen a human under the age of 50 since before disco died. Link found the snack machine first. "Still stocked," he said, awed. Raphael was looking at the map. "This place has levels, like 32. One's labeled temporal R&D. You think that's like watches?" "Sure," Raphael said. "Probably watches." Somewhere deeper in the complex, unnoticed by anyone, a light flickered on above a button. The button read, clearly, "Do not press." It was glowing. Naturally, they pressed it. The button clicked with a satisfying mechanical thunk, followed by a chirp that sounded suspiciously cheerful for something likely built during a time when as usual, it ended with a bang. Specifically, the kind of bang that embedded their parents' BMW halfway into the garage ceiling. Again. "I think it's better this time," Raphael offered, brushing dust from his hoodie, which was also on fire. The trajectory was cleaner. Link poked at the carbonized remains of a guitar pedal with the tip of his sneaker. "It's still vibrating," he noted. Is that structural?" Above them, the BMW rotated slightly, nudged by a piece of shattered drum cymbal that had somehow lodged into the chassis like a throwing star. Somewhere deeper in the house, a smoke alarm was either having a stroke or composing its first techno album. They had 5 minutes, maybe less. The parents were en route, summoned by the explosion detection app tied to their insurance premiums. The last time it had gone off, a drone delivered a cease and desist from the local zoning board before the smoke even cleared. Raphael lunged for the mop, Link for the fire extinguisher, and both moved with the careful speed of people who had once, in the pursuit of art, set a kitchen blender to puree and fed it raw fireworks. The cleanup effort was valiant. That was the best anyone would say. By the time the sleek black car pulled into the smoking remnants of the driveway, Link had successfully reattached the mailbox using duct tape, optimism, and 2 stolen forks. And Raphael had spray-painted a mural over the scorched garage wall in hopes that they'd just vibe with it. They didn't. The moment the doors opened, the air filled with the sharp scent of high society disappointment. Mr. Masters, whose smile had once negotiated 7 mergers and 1 interplanetary resource treaty, blinked at the carnage as though trying to process whether the laws of physics or manners had failed harder. Mrs. Chains wore sunglasses so expensive they had their own offshore bank account. She took one slow look at the scene, adjusted her scarf, and said only, "Military school." "No," Mr. Masters said. "Worse, independence." 2 hours later, Raphael and Link were being driven, unsupervised, to what would soon be the weirdest footnote in American classified history. They sulked in silence across the black leather seats of the family hover SUV, technically legal only in Nevada, but their parents had connections. You realize this is just exile with a minibar, Link muttered. At least we'll finally have space to blow things up without blowing up anyone else's assets, Raphael said, ever the optimist. The house was modern in the way that buildings designed by AI architects who had only ever seen furniture catalogs tend to be. The front room had a pool table positioned where a dining table might have gone, a fridge the size of a crypt, and art so minimalist it was possibly an elaborate prank. The backyard featured a small pool, a malfunctioning grill, and perhaps most importantly, no neighbors for at least 3 miles in any direction. They set up the band equipment in the front room within an hour. Within 2, they had already overloaded 1 circuit breaker. It was during the installation of what Link called the real base Canon Mark IV that the first accident of significance occurred. Did we have concrete behind that wall before? Raphael asked, frowning as the last of the dust settled. The blast had taken out most of the southern basement wall. Where once there had been a suspiciously reinforced panel, now there was a heavy steel door, fused at the seams with the kind of aesthetic that whispered government secrets and possibly radiation. It had no handle, no keypad, no obvious way to open it, which of course meant they were definitely going to try. It took them half an hour and 3 questionable applications of crowbars, electromagnets, and 1 leftover band symbol, but eventually the thing hissed open with the reluctant sigh of a facility waking from a half-century nap. Inside was an elevator. Service elevator, Link noted, but like aggressively serious service, possibly involving black sites. Raphael pressed the only button available. The door shut behind them with the finality of a submarine hatch. The floor began to hum. Somewhere several hundred feet below, in a dimly lit control room lined with blinking lights, unfinished pizza crusts, and Cold War coffee cups, a janitor named Stanley Jensen opened one eye. He'd been napping since 1987, officially. The CIA had classified the facility mothballed and sealed, which in practice meant they forgot it existed after a change in budget lines, and the intern who used to file things under Nevada left for law school. Stanley wasn't bothered. He liked it here. It was quiet. Everything worked. The robots were polite. Occasionally, the internal AI would play reruns of Gilligan's Island, which he found soothing. He was, in his own way, the last warden of a forgotten frontier of American insanity. Until now. He reached for the phone. It was still wired. He dialed the emergency line, one of only 3 numbers he still remembered. Jensen, he said. God, you're still alive? The voice on the other end muttered. You mothballed the lab, not me. What's the status? We've got visitors. Agents? No, teenagers. Silence. Can you contain them? Nope. New property owners, apparently. Legal. Transfer filed with the county. I checked. The land deed says, masters in chains, joint custody. A sigh. Then observe. I was planning to nap. You can nap between disasters. Fine. By the time the elevator opened for Raphael and Link, Stanley had switched into his janitor uniform, a decision he would later regret, and was hiding behind a wall of old soda machines, watching 2 of America's wealthiest teenagers walk into a facility that hadn't seen a human under the age of 50 since before disco died. Link found the snack machine first. Still stocked, he said, awed. Raphael was looking at the map. This place has levels, like 32. One's labeled temporal R&D. You think that's like watches? Sure, Raphael said. Probably watches. Somewhere deeper in the complex, unnoticed by anyone, a light flickered on above a button. The button read, clearly, do not press. It was glowing. Naturally, they pressed it. The button clicked with a satisfying mechanical thunk, followed by a chirp that sounded suspiciously cheerful for something likely built during a time when computers still required punch cards and mild paranoia. Lights hummed on in distant corridors. Somewhere far below, a ventilation system wheezed to life. A siren coughed once, decided against it, and went back to sleep. I feel like we just did a thing, Link said, staring at the now depressed button. Technically, Raphael replied, we did exactly the one thing the sign said not to. I mean, that's not legally binding. No, but it does feel spiritually inadvisable. The room did not explode. No poison gas hissed from the vents. No countdown began. In fact, absolutely nothing appeared to happen, which was worse. Well, Raphael said, brushing imaginary dust from his jacket, I guess it's broken. Link eyed it warily. Or we just started a process, a slow, chemical, catastrophic process. They left the room, partly out of growing boredom and partly because a vending machine in the corner was flashing the words "Fresh Pizza Available" in bright green font. Oh, no, Stanley whispered from behind his soda machines. Not the pizza trigger. It had been a mistake, a simple misfile. One technician had once ordered pizza on government time, and during a system upgrade, the lab's AI had mistakenly linked several non-critical processes to the term pizza protocol. Now, buried deep within the facility, two long dormant chemical canisters began to leak into one another. Their names were unpronounceable in English, but the effect was simple. When mixed, they reconstituted an alien biogenic organism believed to be a prototype reconnaissance unit sent by a species whose only exposure to Earth came from intercepted cartoon broadcasts and reruns of Italian cooking shows. The creature had been secured in 1968 after it declared war on a Chuck E. Cheese, and now it was waking up. Meanwhile, upstairs in what was now, legally, a living room with too many wires and not enough adult supervision, Raphael and Link had set up what they believed to be a surveillance command center. In reality, they had plugged several dusty monitors into a mainframe that once ran threat simulations against the Soviets, and were now using it to stream retro anime and security cam footage from the facility. Did you know there's a level just labeled Cursed Objects and another marked Shoe Protocol Testing? Why are those separate things? Link asked. I don't know, but there's a room full of helmets that seem to whisper threats. That's kind of neat. Link leaned back on the couch, munching on vending machine protein chips that were definitely older than either of them. I thought this was going to be awful, you know, isolated house in the woods, band exile, but this is like best case scenario. Right? I mean, we're not alone. We've got a nuclear basement full of secret toys. And at that moment, from one of the abandoned lower corridors, a green mist curled into the air. It twisted, swirled, pulsed, and then began to congeal. The being took shape slowly. It had limbs, but no bones. Eyes, but too many. A mouth, but no sense of volume control. It flickered in and out of phase as it adjusted to its surroundings. Then it spoke. In a perfect imitation of a 1990s cartoon sidekick, it said, "Where's the pizza, baby?" The facility shuddered slightly. A few control panels exploded out of sheer embarrassment. Somewhere in the AI subroutines, 3 separate firewalls declared bankruptcy. Back upstairs, Stanley finally revealed himself. He did not do this with flair. He simply walked into the room wearing his janitor's coveralls, holding a mop like it was both a weapon and a philosophy. "You idiots touched the button, didn't you?" Link yelped and dropped his snack. Raphael pointed a potato chip at him. "You're real?" Stanley sighed. "Unfortunately, and so is the thing you just woke up." "What thing?" "The green thing." "That's not very descriptive," Link said. "No," Stanley agreed, "but trust me, you'll know it when it finds you, or pizza." "Wait, why would it be looking for pizza?" Stanley looked at them like a man who had seen too much, lived too long, and once got into a fistfight with a self-aware filing cabinet. "Because," he said, "some genius decided to beam 11 years of Earth cartoon broadcasts into space as part of our diplomatic outreach program." "That seems like a terrible idea." "It was. The alien you just woke up thinks Bugs Bunny is a war hero, SpongeBob is a tactical strategist, and Garfield is some kind of deity." Link frowned. "Is he wrong about Garfield, though?" The floor shook. A distant voice echoed through the ventilation shafts. "Show me the cheese-stuffed crust Earthlings!" "Oh no," Stanley muttered. "It's already activated mimic mode." "Mimic what?" Raphael asked. Stanley gave them a look. Cartoon logic. They heard the boing of a spring that had no physical origin. Then a whump as something green, bendy, and distinctly against all known physical laws bounced off the side of the house and rolled into a bush, where it promptly split in half and started arguing with itself over anchovies. Link turned to Raphael. "This is going to be awesome." The green thing, now 2 green things, were engaged in what appeared to be a heated debate over which fictional pizza was the most canonically powerful. One of them insisted it was the half-mushroom, half-justice pizza from Captain Space Slice. The other claimed with great conviction that the cheese swirl in Power Pie Patrol Episode 9, Crust Crusade, could bend time. They were gesticulating wildly, limbs flopping in directions that would make most physicists cry as they bounced across the backyard at speeds usually reserved for malfunctioning particle accelerators. Inside the house, Raphael was pressed against the glass of the sliding door, watching the debate unfold like a kid spotting Santa fighting a raccoon. "So, what exactly do they do?" he asked. Stanley, who had retrieved a clipboard from an emergency locker marked "Due" for when the cartoon thing wakes up, flipped a few pages. "They save people." "That's good. By accident. Less good. And only while trying to obtain pizza." Link blinked. "You mean they don't actually care about helping?" "No. Think of them like a slapstick guardian angel with a one-track mind, a deep misunderstanding of the food pyramid, and no off switch." Raphael turned from the window, thoughtful. "So if we're in danger, they'll probably burst through a wall, trip over themselves, bounce off several exposed pipes, accidentally disable a bomb, and land in a delivery box," Stanley said. "If you're lucky. And if we're not lucky, they order anchovies. Nobody survives anchovies." The floor trembled again. From the main hallway came a screech, followed by a sonic boom that reversed half the light bulbs in the ceiling. One of the green things burst into the living room, its eyes wide and glistening. "We sensed a Domino's," it declared, then vanished into the pantry. There was a pause, a long, horrified pause. Raphael coughed. "So, subplots." Link, without missing a beat, pointed toward the garage. "Well, subplot number 1, we may have accidentally triggered a defense drone." "How?" "I tried to see if the old VR rig still worked." "Did it?" "No. But the VR helmet is now fused to the vacuum cleaner, which seems to believe it's an elite Marine. It's taken up a sniper position on the roof and keeps yelling about sector clearances." Stanley did not groan. Stanley was past groaning. He merely opened a side cabinet, removed what appeared to be a tranquilizer dart the size of a loaf of bread, and handed it to Raphael. "Hit it in the Roomba port." "Noted." As Raphael left to disarm the aggressively tactical vacuum cleaner, Link tapped at one of the still active consoles. "Hey, subplot number 2 might be unfolding on level 14. Stanley joined him and squinted at the monitor. A grainy black and white feed showed one of the lab's secure chambers, the one labeled Experimental Chronobehavioral Reversals, now open, lights on. "Oh no," Stanley muttered, "the time rats." Link slowly turned. "Time? Rats? They're rats, right?" Stanley said, rubbing his temple. "But when startled, they reverse their own personal timeline by several seconds. Makes them impossible to trap." "That sounds cute," Stanley offered. "I was going to say a statistical nightmare. They've bred since the 60s. Nobody checked how many. They could be in the walls." "Are they dangerous?" "Only if you observe them. Like really observe them. There's a threshold of awareness. Once you pass it, they start treating you like a threat." "How will I know if I've passed it?" "You'll see a rat reading." Link glanced nervously at the monitor again. "Well, subplot 2 is now about stopping time-literate rodents before they achieve a breakthrough." Outside, Raphael had subdued the vacuum. It wasn't easy. It required a trampoline, 3 full bottles of soda, and a half-played Kenny Loggins cassette that, for some reason, caused the drone to enter reflective nostalgia mode. Once it began weeping about its simulated war buddies in Operation Hardwood Dustpan, he hit it with the dart and stuffed it under a tarp. He walked back inside just in time for the power to flicker and a soft humming sound to rise from the floorboards. In the center of the living room, the green things had rejoined, fusion apparently triggered by the smell of reheated pizza rolls, and were now glowing faintly. "What now?" Raphael asked. "They're stabilizing," Stanley said warily. "Is that good?" "Debatable. Usually means they've found a chosen one figure in the area." Both teens turned to look at each other. The green thing pointed directly at Stanley. Everyone froze. "Oh no," Stanley said, horror rising in his voice. "You have the cheese wisdom," the green thing declared. "No, I don't. You once worked at a pizzeria in 1974. I ran the register. Then it is you who shall lead us to the sacred slice." The lights dimmed. A low chant began, possibly from the house's intercom, possibly from the green thing's internal soundboard. Raphael patted Stanley on the back. "You'll be fine. I'm 74 years old. I wanted to be left alone." Link grinned. "Then next time, don't build your hermit bunker on top of the gateway to cartoon-powered alien pizza mythology." The green thing extended a hand. "To the kitchen temple." And as Stanley was hoisted bodily into the air by squishy limbs and carried down the hallway in a tangle of enthusiasm, accidental destiny, and leftover marinara sauce, the house settled again. Momentarily. Link turned to Raphael. So, you think they'll ever find out we faked the sale paperwork on this house? Raphael shrugged. Depends how long it takes the CIA to get bored again. They high-fived. The facility hummed beneath them, a treasure trove of madness, secrets, weaponized kitchenware, and at least 6 unresolved conspiracy theories, all about to be made much, much worse. They were home. Stanley returned the next morning with pizza sauce in his beard, a haunted look in his eyes, and a stack of napkins imprinted with alien glyphs that, according to him, translated roughly to infinite cheese and your sauce is strong. He refused to speak of what had happened in the pantry temple. Just know this, he muttered as he shuffled to the couch and collapsed. The fridge is now sacred space. Enter with reverence, or not at all. Raphael saluted. So no more touching the meat drawer, no more opening it unless you wish to experience the memories of 1,000 forgotten toppings. Got it! Stanley groaned and turned on his side. You two are going to break causality like a glow stick at a rave. Link was flipping through the facility schematics they'd printed out on a repurposed dot matrix printer. So I was thinking, no, Stanley mumbled. We should probably check out that weird humming we keep hearing from sublevel 27. Stanley pulled a pillow over his head. There's a note next to it in the logs, Link continued. It says experimental empathy engine. Sounds harmless. Could be good, for therapy. Raphael was nodding enthusiastically. Right? Maybe it's like a mood enhancer. We could beam compassion across the world. It weaponizes feelings, Stanley groaned from beneath the pillow. Link paused. I mean, maybe just some feelings? Last time someone turned it on, an entire town in Iowa wept for 6 straight days. They held hands, planted a forest, and overthrew their zoning board, which admittedly was corrupt. I like trees, Raphael offered. I like zoning boards, Stanley growled. They keep the Taco Bells from touching the nuclear waste depositories. I'm just saying, Link added, if it's still working, maybe we could use it to boost morale. Like for the band. Raphael gasped. Yes, emotional resonance concert. Stanley sat up abruptly. Fine, but I'm coming with you. If that thing turns on and I see even one of you compose a song that causes an emotional breakdown in a 10-mile radius, I'm dragging your souls into the analog void personally. Sublevel 27 was, for lack of a better term, suspiciously well lit. The rest of the complex had that pleasant Cold War gloom. Corridors of beige metal, flickering fluorescent tubes, and ominous safety posters featuring cartoon mascots with dead eyes. But 27, it was backlit in soft blues and purples. The floor hummed gently, and somewhere in the distance, a harp was playing. This place smells like aromatherapy, Link said. Raphael inhaled. Lavender and... is that cinnamon toast? Do not relax, Stanley warned. It feeds on emotional openness. The empathy engine sat at the center of a large circular chamber. It resembled a satellite dish crossed with a music box and a particularly judgmental sentient tulip. Small tuning forks rotated around it, vibrating faintly with each footstep. Link approached the console. It's warm. It wants to feel you, Stanley said grimly. It's like a big emotional Roomba. That's not comforting. Raphael gently pressed the console's main interface, which resembled a heart encased in crystal. A soft chime echoed through the room. Then, nothing. Maybe it's out of juice, Link offered. And then the walls spoke, not with words, but with feeling. A wave of pure melancholy surged through the chamber, mild at first, like remembering a forgotten birthday, then more intense, like the final note of a really good series finale. Raphael dropped to his knees. I miss my hamster. You never had a hamster, Stanley pointed out. I miss the idea of a hamster. Link stared at his hands. My fingers are just tiny arms with fingernails. That's so weird. Stanley wobbled. Nope, no thank you. We are shutting this down. But before he could reach the failsafe, the green thing arrived, bouncing, oscillating, arms wide and full of vending machine pepperoni. I heard your feelings from upstairs, it declared. You require pizza hugs. The empathy engine, sensing a being of undefined emotional parameters, spun faster. The air turned pink. Oh no, Stanley said. It's sinking. What does that mean? Link asked. Ever see a cartoon have a romantic meltdown and an existential crisis at the same time? No, you're about to. The green thing paused, cocked its head, and then split, this time into 3 smaller versions of itself, each one representing a different emotional state. Sad one, wailed the first. Why does the pizza never love me back? Happy one, cheered the second. I found a slice in the ceiling tile. Angry one, snarled the third. Anchovies are a crime against culinary dignity. The empathy engine began to spark. Its tuning forks turned red. The walls wept actual tears. Stanley didn't wait. He lunged forward, slapped the failsafe override with the authority of a man who'd shut down psychic pancake riots before, and killed the power. The green things merged, belched emotionally, and collapsed into a giggling pile of goo. Everyone stood still. Then Raphael clapped. 10 out of 10. Would empathize again. Stanley just shook his head. You're both disasters. Link offered him a napkin from his back pocket. You've got emotional discharge on your shoulder. Of course I do. That night, as the house settled once more and the facility returned to its odd hum, Stanley sat on the porch with the boys. The stars were bright. The air smelled like ozone and expired snack food. You know, Stanley said after a long silence, I was planning to retire in this bunker. Quietly, fade into history. Instead, you got us, Raphael said proudly. 2 unqualified teenagers, a cartoon-obsessed alien, and an unlicensed time lab. Link raised his soda can. To weird roommates. Stanley sighed, but it was lighter this time. To weird roommates. Somewhere below, in the deepest part of the facility, a light blinked on in a chamber simply labeled Level. The blinking light in Level C was technically speaking not supposed to exist, not because it was dangerous, though it absolutely was, but because the paperwork required to create a Level C was so convoluted that even the CIA, a historically paperwork-forward organization, had decided it was easier to lose the blueprints and bribe the janitor to forget it, which in theory had worked until now. Do you smell that? Link asked over breakfast the next morning. Burnt electricity and nostalgia. Raphael sniffed the air. That's either the toaster or we've triggered another forbidden system. Stanley entered the kitchen with his usual pre-coffee limp. He opened the fridge, hesitated, bowed slightly, and withdrew a sacred soda. He had adapted. No more buttons, he warned. We didn't press anything, Raphael said. This time, Link clarified. Stanley stared at them over the rim of his mug. Okay, we didn't press anything, Raphael amended. But the green thing... Stanley's hand hit the table like a gavel. If you finish that sentence with might have sat on the nuclear console because it thought it was a bouncy castle, I will lock you both in the empathy chamber for 24 hours of intense feeling. They were silent. Guilty. Slightly impressed. I told you it was shaped like a trampoline, Link muttered. Stanley sighed the long, low sigh of a man who had once defused an interdimensional landmine using only a mop and a jazz record. Well, he said, might as well get ahead of it. Follow me. They took elevator D, which only went one direction, down, and required a key card, a blood sample, and the ability to recite the second stanza of the national anthem backwards. Stanley, of course, had long since replaced the blood scanner with a warm cup of black coffee. It was easier that way. Level 3 didn't have walls so much as it had implications. The moment the elevator opened, the air changed. It smelled of circuits, secrets, and popcorn from a timeline that never happened. The room beyond was vast, so vast that the ceiling wasn't visible and the floor looked like glass, or maybe a lake pretending to be a floor. And in the middle of it was a cube, perfect, floating, buzzing with potential. The green thing floated beside it, wide-eyed. I touched it, it whispered. Of course you did, Stanley muttered. What is it? Raphael asked, stepping closer. The archetype core, Stanley said. It's a story engine. Like a narrative generator? No. A literal engine that fuels plot lines, unresolved conflicts, prophecy arcs, love triangles, weirdly convenient flashbacks. Link's eyes lit up. So you're saying this powers stories? Yes. Can we use it to get a Grammy? No. Can we use it to turn our band into an intergalactic myth with a tragic backstory and a 3-act structure? Stanley turned slowly. Did you two read the part of the orientation packet labeled, "Do not treat the narrative drive as a toy"? No, Raphael said. There was an orientation packet? Link asked. Stanley looked at the cube. The cube hummed back. He rubbed his face. Listen to me very carefully. If this thing fully activates, you don't get a story. You live one, and you don't get to choose the genre. What's wrong with that? Raphael asked. It assigns arcs, gives everyone a role in the narrative ecosystem. You might think you're the protagonist, he pointed at Link, but what if the story decides you're the mentor who dies in Act 2? Hey, Link said. Or the comic relief character who accidentally triggers the apocalypse. Raphael blinked. That actually sounds kind of on brand. The cube pulsed again. A faint melody filled the air, minor key, foreboding. Then a voice spoke. It was neither male nor female, old nor young, it simply was. Identities assigned, story initialization, beginning. No, Stanley muttered. No, no, no. Characters, the innocent, the trickster, the watcher, the fool. Oh no, Link said. We're in a Joseph Campbell situation. I always wanted to be the trickster, Raphael said brightly. You're the fool, Stanley growled. We're all the fool. That's the problem. Suddenly, reality tilted. The walls folded inward. The floor glass rippled like water. The air itself seemed to chuckle. And then, cut to, flashback. They were in a black and white 1950s diner. Link wore suspenders. Raphael had a pompadour. Stanley was inexplicably wearing a milkman uniform and holding a wrench labeled exposition. What is happening? Stanley muttered. I think we're in a flashback cutaway gag, Link said. It's doing metaplot. Do you want the exposition now, sir? Said a small, robotic waitress with googly eyes. Stanley hurled the wrench at the jukebox. The diner exploded in a puff of script notes and surrealism. They were back. All right, Stanley said, brushing existential residue off his pants. New rule, we put the cube back to sleep. How? Raphael asked. We create a resolution. You mean? Yes, Stanley gritted his teeth. You have to finish a subplot. By now, the green thing had assembled what it called a Team Pizza Justice Squad. It had taped googly eyes to a mop, given the vacuum a sword, and declared Link Supreme Commander of Sauce. It was organizing a plan to raid the military museum wing and recover what it claimed was the eternal pepperoni blade. Meanwhile, the empathy engine had turned back on by itself and was now broadcasting soft jazz across all frequencies in an effort to soothe the cube. Stanley did not scream. He merely sighed, bent down, and opened a crate labeled, Plot Device, Use Only, If Desperate. Inside was a box of costume mustaches, a chalkboard, and one pre-written dramatic betrayal. I hate this place, he muttered. But as the cube pulsed, the world wavered, and a sudden mini-musical sequence began to creep in through the speakers. Stanley knew one thing for sure. If he didn't resolve a subplot fast, he'd be singing his feelings in the next 5 minutes. And nobody, not even fate, wanted to see that. It started, as most accidental musicals do, with the chalkboard. Stanley held the stub of a government-issued chalk stick, hefted like a weapon, and stared grimly at the boys across the glassy floor of level Lasake. The archetype core pulsed behind him, rhythmically thumping like it had swallowed a Broadway orchestra. I need a subplot, he said through gritted teeth. One that ends, not unravels, not grows legs, not explodes, ends, wraps, resolves. Link blinked. You mean like the emotional arc of a side character? Yes. Raphael perked up. Ooh, I nominate Stanley. No. Yes, Link agreed. The reclusive janitor with a tragic past. You've got all the setup, rough demeanor, mysterious files, emotional baggage, probably a lost love. Shut up. Maybe, Raphael said dreamily. He lost someone during his time in the sentient crockpot division. A forbidden kitchen love. I said shut up. The archetype core flared. Somewhere overhead, ghostly musical chords began to descend like fog. Stanley looked upward and screamed, No, I will not sing. The music paused, temporarily. But the rules were clear now. A subplot must conclude or the song would come. With jazz hands. Fine, Stanley growled. Fine, I have a subplot, one that's been hanging around this damn place since Nixon took his lunch break. He stomped to a panel on the far side of the chamber and pressed a recessed button labeled Retired Files, Unsolved, Unapproved, Just Weird. With a hiss, the wall opened. Inside was a single file folder, thick, yellowed, slightly damp. Its tab read, Operation Gravy Phoenix. Link squinted. That sounds edible? It wasn't, Stanley muttered. It was a counter-espionage project, canceled in '73 after the subject, Agent Gloria Kane, defected. To the Soviets? Raphael asked. No, to a commune in northern Vermont. Built a yurt, started selling emotionally conscious jams. The boys nodded solemnly. This was still, technically, espionage. Stanley handed them a photograph from the folder. In it, a young Stanley, hair thick, uniform crisp, mustache unforgivably sincere, stood next to a woman in a trench coat holding a telekinetic fork. This was the mission that broke me, he said quietly. They told me she was rogue, a threat, but she just wanted out, wanted peace, and He trailed off. You let her go, Link said. I did, and I lied about it. filed a report saying she fell into a vat of government pudding. The archetype core thrummed. The color shifted. Less threatening now, more intrigued. Stanley set the photo down reverently. I resolve it now. I did the right thing. I never saw her again, but she deserved better than a government lab and a folder labeled possibly friendly, definitely weird. The boys were quiet. Then, slowly, the archetype core's glow softened. The melodic pressure faded, and one final line, clear, resonant, absolute, echoed through the chamber. Subplot resolved, narrative containment stabilized. The cube dimmed, the lights returned to normal, and just like that, the musical was canceled. Good job, Raphael said, clapping Stanley on the shoulder. Yeah, Link added. No singing. That's a win. Stanley didn't answer. He was holding something. A jam jar. It hadn't been there a moment ago. The label was handwritten. For SJ Extra Apricot, no regrets. He didn't say a word, just tucked it into his jacket and walked toward the elevator. The green thing poked its head in, saw that the music was gone, and visibly deflated. I was gonna tap dance with my cheese. Next time, Raphael promised. Maybe in the episode where you find the pizza dimension. The green thing gasped, there is a dimension! Not yet, but give us time. That night, the team sat under the stars again, this time with an illegal cheese fondue kit and 3 lawn chairs shaped like old Mars probes. So what did we learn today? Raphael asked. Don't push cubes that talk, Link said. Don't ignore subplots, Stanley muttered. Don't let aliens compose musicals, the green thing added. There was a quiet pause. Then Link glanced at his watch. You guys hear that humming? Stanley's head dropped into his hands. Please, he said, muffled. Please let it be a normal humming. From beneath the deck, a soft, warbling buzz rose. Then a crash. Then, zzz, time displacement chamber now active. Please stand by. Raphael blinked. You think it's the rats? Link nodded. Yup. Time-traveling rats? Yup. Stanley didn't move. I want to transfer, he whispered. To where? Raphael asked. Somewhere quiet, peaceful, far away. The empathy chamber? Link offered. I said peaceful, not emotionally traumatic. The green thing was already rolling toward the sound, giggling. I'm gonna teach the rats to sing. Link raised his soda. To next week's subplot. Time rats, baby. Raphael agreed, clinking cans. Time rats. The camera would pan upward here if this were a show. Just as the deck door creaked open behind them and a tiny rat-shaped blur zipped past, carrying what looked suspiciously like a harmonica and a very small top hat. The new arrival came in through the ceiling. Not intentionally, of course. The ceiling panel was clearly marked, do not drop agents here, but nobody read that part. A sleek black cable lowered him slowly, boots first, tactical harness gleaming, communication array blinking red, blue, green like a confused Christmas tree. He paused halfway down, checked his wrist display, and frowned. Confirming drop zone level 9.3? He tapped the screen. What kind of facility uses decimals? The cable jerked. Hold on, I'm not. It snapped. He landed face first into a cart of expired pudding cups labeled emotionally volatile, do not shake. The cups erupted in a sticky, mildly telepathic splash. Moments later, a door creaked open nearby. The green thing rolled into view, chewing on an old floppy disk. Hello, strange, creamy stranger, it announced. The agent froze. What? I am the green thing, it said proudly. What? He repeated, slightly higher. Would you like to see my sock collection? He reached for his sidearm. The green thing blinked all 4 eyes, 2 frontal, 2 on stalks, and giggled. Oh, you think that works on me? It turned inside out. The agent screamed. 2 emergency systems activated at once. One released calming lavender mist into the corridor, and the other began playing a soothing rendition of Ave Maria through a dusty wall speaker. When the mist cleared, the green thing was gone, so were half the pudding cups. The agent stood shakily, one eyebrow twitching. This is worse than Antarctica, he muttered. He tapped his headset. Control, this is Echo Foxtrot Whiskey Zulu. Agent designation Wolf. No, Night Viper. No, I changed it. Fortress. Let's go with Fortress today. Do you copy? Static. He sighed. Then the hallway lit up. Welcome, a pleasant voice intoned from the overhead speakers system. To the Jenkins Kleinman Subterranean Research Facility for questionably ethical advancements and lunch storage. Please enjoy our new holographic assistant, now rendering. A 3D projection flickered to life in front of him. It was Link. Not real Link. A hologram. Shirtless. Wearing medieval armor and holding a bag of tacos. Wait, what? The agent asked. The hologram began to speak in slow, echoing tones. I am the taco warden. You must locate the janitor. Yes, the agent exclaimed. Yes, that's what I'm trying to. But beware, the hologram continued, for he is always one floor above, or possibly in the shower. He likes the agent blinked. Why would anyone program this? The PA system flared again. Also, avoid level 17. The ghost interns are unionizing. He turned down the next corridor, only to run face first into another projection, this time of Raphael, dramatically slow motion diving through a ring of fire while juggling plasma grenades and yelling, "We never trained for this." The image froze, flickered, and morphed into a floating banana labeled, "Janitor? Probably not." Okay, the agent said, stepping back. This is not an actionable intelligence environment. Another announcement pinged in. Caution, room temperatures may not follow logic. And neither do the janitor's routes. 2 hours later, he was running. Not from something specific, although a self-aware fondue fountain had begun following him, playing jazz, but from the general principle of chaos. He turned one corner, nearly collided with a vending machine that began trying to sell him Doom Nuggets, and flung himself into a closet labeled Closet. Non-haunted, probably. Inside, he found a lone sandwich. It had a tag, Stanley's. Touch and perish. He backed out slowly. In the distance, a door hissed open. "Stanley?" he called. A mop fell from the ceiling. It had googly eyes. He screamed again. From somewhere, the green thing whispered, "You cannot find what wanders with purpose." Then silence. The lights dimmed. The PA system flickered. "Janitor proximity 8 meters, it said cheerfully. He turned to run. The PA changed. "Janitor now 24 meters. Whoops, just missed him." The agent dropped to his knees. "I just want to report in," he whimpered. "I'm missing 2 shoes and possibly an hour of memory." A door opened in front of him. Inside was a small room, empty but for a chalkboard that read, "You are here. The janitor is not." A single vending machine beeped softly and offered him a soda. He took it. And that's how Agent whatever his name was, be it Fortress, Night Viper, or Lunch Recon Delta, became a permanent resident of the labyrinth. Every few episodes, he'd stumble into frame, disheveled, desperate, convinced the janitor was just around the next corner. But he never was, and maybe he never would be, until the story decided it was time, or the vending machine unionized, whichever came first. It was 3 days, facility time, since the agent's descent, and while time in the lab wasn't precisely linear thanks to the espresso incident in the Temporal Cafe, the rest of the crew had begun to forget about him. This was not malice. It was entropy. Raphael and Link had for the most part settled into a routine that resembled both an after-school special and a soft government conspiracy. Band practice in the front room, deep lab exploration in the afternoon, and evening rituals involving ritual pizza offerings to appease the green thing, who now claimed ambassadorial rights for Planet Za. Stanley, for his part, had adopted the role of reluctant mentor meets building superintendent. He grumbled a lot, mopped the wrong direction just to confuse the automated maintenance drones, and maintained an ever-growing list of protocols he refused to enforce. Somewhere near Protocol 1137C, do not allow teenagers to pilot reality editing terminals, he had simply written in red marker. Too late. So when the announcement system buzzed to life unexpectedly during lunch, everyone froze. Emergency update. Agent located in Sector 14C. Visible. Audible. Possibly hallucinating. Link blinked. Wait, he's real. I thought that was a fever dream, Raphael muttered. Stanley sighed. He's real. Or was. Haven't seen him in years. It's been 3 days, Link pointed out. In the lab, that's years. Maybe decades. I once passed a hallway that aged me 5 months and taught me Latin. Follow-up. Agent is now chasing a holographic replica of himself, requesting moral support. They ran to the nearest monitor. The feed showed the agent, wearing half a tuxedo and one snowshoe, charging through a hallway filled with rotating spotlights, screaming, "Which of us is real? Answer me!" A nearby bot, shaped like a rotary phone, chimed in, "Plot development detected." The camera cut away just as he tackled the hologram, passed through it, and crashed into a cart full of live microdrama spores. The feed cut to static, followed by a helpful slide that read, "This plot is under renovation. Please stand by." Meanwhile, Level 5, officially labeled Innovative Agriculture Emergency Snack Theory, had begun sprouting an alarming number of sapient potato hybrids. This was, of course, entirely due to the green thing's efforts to create pizza that grew on vines. It had not succeeded. Instead, it had genetically confused starch-based root vegetables into thinking they were toppings with a destiny. One such potato, wearing a thimble and a tiny cape, was now giving a speech in the hallway, standing on a microwave. "I say unto you," it bellowed, "no more side dishes. We are the meal." "Should we be worried?" Link asked as they watched from the corridor's observation window. "I dunno," Raphael replied. "Is this more or less dangerous than the time the AI tried to draft us into a reality show?" "More organized," Stanley muttered. "That Spud has charisma." Indeed, the potato crowd was growing. Signs began to appear: equal rights for hash browns, fries before guys, and don't tread on me, I'm mashed. Then suddenly, the green thing rolled in and declared, "This is not a pizza-approved revolution. Stand down, starch citizens." Chaos ensued. Potatoes flew. Sporks were brandished. Somewhere in the back, a genetically enhanced parsley leaf began narrating the battle in Shakespearean verse. While Link and Raphael tried to defuse the uprising by playing a poorly tuned rendition of Kumbaya on keytar and trash can lid, Stanley leaned against the wall and sighed. "Should have transferred to Area 52, he muttered. Then, a whisper echoed through the hallway. "Janitor! Janitor!" He turned, eyes narrowing. At the far end of the corridor, past the tumbling tubers and airborne condiments, stood the agent, wide-eyed, disheveled, holding a map that had clearly been printed by a printer suffering an identity crisis. "You!" the agent shouted. "At last!" Stanley stepped forward. "You found me." The agent beamed. "Yes, finally. I have urgent." "Stanley!" yelled Link. "I need backup. This yam's got a grudge." Stanley glanced back. When he looked forward again, the agent was gone, vanished. Like a deleted subplot, only a faint smear of pudding residue remained. Link ran up, breathless. "Was that?" Stanley nodded slowly. "Agent something. I think his name changes depending on what mood the lab's in. Makes sense." Back in the shadows, a vending machine hummed. Inside it, the agent crouched, breathing heavily. He pressed a button. "Cheesy crackle pop, please." It vended a VHS tape labeled "How to Find the Janitor in 14 Difficult Steps." He wept. And thus, the agent remained, always close, always one room behind, frequently mistaken for his own doppelganger, and perpetually confused by the janitor's ability to vanish into the ductwork at will. But one day, perhaps in a finale or a particularly strange holiday episode, he would find him. Maybe. If the potatoes didn't unionize first.
Aroma of fresh coffee and warm donuts drifted lazily through the humid, recycled air of the underground corridors. It was a scent that didn't quite belong in a world of steel and rock, but it was the only thing that made the deep city feel like a home. The tunnels were a labyrinth of copper wiring, heavy reinforced plating, and the constant, rhythmic clatter of food trays. Emma wiped her hands on her stained apron, her movements mechanical and practiced. She stood behind the counter of the terminal, a small breakfast bar tucked away in a corner of Sector 4, nestled miles beneath the planet's surface. To the casual observer, she was just another face in the subterranean crowd. But Emma knew the truth. Above her, the world was a carefully guarded secret, an intricate web of tunnels, hidden hangars, and shimmering portals that bridged the gaps between worlds. Here, in this hidden labyrinth, the air carried the weight of the extraordinary. Every hushed whisper in her shop felt like a piece of a puzzle she wasn't supposed to solve. She had learned early that beneath the surface of normalcy, the universe was spinning on a different axis. It was drifting toward a chaos that the public wasn't ready to face, secrets that would curl the hair of anyone who dared to look too close at the maintenance logs of the orbital elevators. Today, the atmosphere in the shop was heavy. The usual morning chatter, complaints about the water rations or the dim lighting, was gone. In its place was a strange, vibrating undertone of anticipation. Emma moved down the counter, pouring coffee for men with haunted eyes. She caught snippets of conversations that shouldn't have been happening in a diner. "The gate is pulsing," one man whispered, his hands trembling around a ceramic mug. "Mars isn't responding to the handshake signals," another replied. "The Shadow War is coming to the front door." Emma focused on her work, but her heart was beginning to pace. Across the room, tucked into a booth at the far back, sat Alex. He was finishing his third cup of black coffee, staring at a small holographic news feed that showed nothing but technical difficulties, banners. As a high-altitude shuttle pilot, Alex knew the sky and the cold vacuum beyond it better than almost anyone in the sector. But lately, the lines between his routine transport duties and the looming threat of the Void Guard had blurred. He wore no badges. He wore no stripes. He was a shadow in a standard-issue flight jacket, but Emma knew the look in his eyes. It was the look of a man who had seen things through a viewport that shouldn't exist. Emma walked over to his booth, a fresh, glazed donut held in a napkin. She set it on his plate without a word. Alex didn't look up immediately. "You're heading out again, aren't you?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible over the hum of the nearby ventilation fans. Alex finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, weary from a lack of sleep and a surplus of adrenaline. "The portal's acting up, Emma. It's not just a fluctuation in the power grid this time. They're seeing signatures, massive, rhythmic ripples in the fabric of the vacuum. It's like a heartbeat, but it's too big. It's an invasion signature. We've been calling it the Shadow War for years to keep people calm, but the shadows are stepping into the light." Just as the words left his mouth, the ground beneath them didn't just vibrate, it buckled. A deep, bone-shaking groan echoed through the rock, followed by a violent jolt that sent plates sliding off tables and shattered several mugs against the floor. The overhead lights flickered, turned a harsh emergency red, and began to buzz with an angry, electrical whine. Emma gripped the edge of the booth to stay upright. This wasn't a pump failure. This was a kinetic impact on the planetary crust. "They're here," Alex whispered, his voice cold. He stood up so quickly his chair clattered back and struck the stone wall. The intercom system, usually reserved for mundane shift changes, erupted with a sound that sent a chill through the room, a frantic, high-pitched scream of a siren, followed by a voice that sounded like it was coming from the edge of a breakdown. "All combat-capable personnel to battle stations. This is an Omega-level breach. The swarm has bypassed the orbital rings. They are in the atmosphere. I repeat, the swarm is in the atmosphere. This is not a drill." Emma didn't panic. Instead, something shifted in her. The waitress mask fell away, revealing a cold, tactical precision. She reached behind her back and unclipped the ties of her apron, letting it fall to the floor. Beneath it, she wasn't wearing civilian clothes. She was wearing a dark, reinforced G-suit, the kind worn by interceptor pilots. She had been the tactical secondary for Hangar 7 for 3 years, a sleeper agent in her own city. She reached under the counter and pulled out a heavy flight helmet and a sidearm. She looked at Alex, her face a mask of steel. "Alex, get to the interceptors. I've got the keys to the prototype in Hangar 7. We aren't letting them reach the civilian levels." They burst out of the diner and into the main corridor. The quiet underground city was gone, replaced by a nightmare of screaming sirens and the heavy, rhythmic thud of armored boots. Security teams were sprinting toward the surface elevators, their rifles held high. Emma and Alex pushed through the crowd, their focus narrow. They reached the high-speed lift to Hangar 7. As the lift shot upward, the pressure in their ears spiked. When the doors finally hissed open, they weren't in the city anymore. They were on the edge of the world. The hangar doors were wide open, and for the first time, Emma saw the sky. It was a bruised, sickly purple, choked by a swirling, black mass of organic-looking ships. They moved like locusts, diving from the clouds and raking the surface with beams of dark energy. The Shadow War was no longer a whisper, it was a deafening roar. "Go, go, go!" Alex yelled over the sound of a nearby anti-aircraft battery. They scrambled into the cockpit of the Void Runner, a sleek, twin-engine interceptor designed for the vacuum, capable of atmospheric combat. Alex took the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the startup sequence. Emma took the seat behind him, her fingers dancing across the holographic tactical grid. Reactor online. Shields at 100%. Weapons hot, Emma reported, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. "Alex, we've got 4 swarm scouts diving on our position. They're trying to collapse the hangar roof." "Not today," Alex grunted. He slammed the throttle forward. The ship didn't just move, it leapt. The G-force pressed them deep into their ergonomic seats as they cleared the hangar at 500 knots. The battle in the sky was a chaotic ballet of fire and metal. The swarm ships were jagged, obsidian things that seemed to absorb the light around them. Void Guard ships, humanity's last line, darted between them like silver needles, their beams cutting through the purple haze. Every hit to their shields sent a shuddering vibration through the Void Runner's frame, a scream of protesting metal. They're targeting the colony transports. Emma shouted, her eyes fixed on the tactical overlay. Look at the trajectory. They're ignoring the military targets. They want the civilians. I see them, Alex said, his voice dropping into that cold, lethal calm that only came during a dogfight. He rolled the ship, diving through a cloud of debris as a nearby cruiser exploded. We have to pull them off. Emma, give me everything we've got in the forward capacitors. Diverting power now. We're going to be blind on the rear sensors, Alex. I don't plan on letting them get behind us. Alex banked the ship into a sharp, gut-wrenching turn that would have snapped a lesser pilot's neck. He lined up the lead swarm scout in his physical crosshairs. He didn't wait for the computer to lock. He fired. The kinetic cannons roared, a rhythmic thumping that echoed through the cockpit. The obsidian ship disintegrated in a shower of black shards and green fire. But for every one they killed, 3 more seemed to emerge from the clouds. The scale of the invasion was staggering. This wasn't a skirmish, it was an extinction event. Suddenly, the communication channel hissed with static, a high-frequency whine that made Emma wince. Then, a new voice broke through, commanding, resonant, and filled with a strange, magnetic authority. This is Commander Alex Blake to all units. Fall back to the primary gate. We are losing the atmosphere. We must consolidate our fire on the lead cruiser's ventral port. It is the only way to collapse their coordination. We have one shot at this, and we have to take it now. Emma's eyes went wide. She looked at the back of Alex's head, then back to the comms unit. Alex had been the commander all along. The man sitting in her diner was the architect of the defense. You heard the man, Emma yelled, her fingers flying to recalibrate the targeting sensors. Alex, I'm locking onto the flagship. It's that massive, jagged spine at 12 o'clock. I've got it, Alex, Commander Blake replied. He pushed the engines to 110%. The Void Runner screamed as it tore through the atmosphere, a streak of silver in a sea of purple fire. The enemy flagship was a mountain of metal and shadow, nearly a mile long. As they approached, the defensive fire from the cruiser was so thick it looked like a wall of light. Alex wove the ship through the gaps, his instincts guiding him through the impossible. Targeting, targeting, Emma muttered, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Lock confirmed. Blake, the ventral port is open. Fire now. The beam that left their ship wasn't a standard laser. It was a blinding streak of pure, concentrated energy, a piece of the portal itself weaponized. It struck the swarm cruiser's core with the force of a dying star. The explosion was silent at first, a blossoming sphere of white light that consumed everything in its path. Then the sound hit, a roar that seemed to vibrate the very atoms of their bodies. The enemy flagship buckled. Its internal systems cascaded in a series of blinding eruptions, tearing the obsidian hull apart from the inside out. The remaining swarm vessels, their hive mind coordination shattered by the death of their flagship, began to scatter. They pulled up from their dive bombing runs, retreating back toward the shimmering, bruised distortion of the portal high in the thermosphere. As the fires dimmed and the purple sky began to fade back to a smoky gray, a heavy, ringing silence settled over the cockpit. Alex leaned back, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. He pulled his helmet off, his hair matted with sweat. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind an ache in his bones that felt like it would never go away. He looked at Emma through the reflection in the glass. "You okay?" "I think so," she whispered. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. "Did we win?" Alex took a shaky breath, his voice trembling as he radioed back to the scattered remnants of the Void Guard. "This is Commander Blake. We've repelled the attack. We held the door, but I've got a bad feeling. They're not done. They were testing us. Prepare for the next wave. It could come at any moment." Across the system, the remnants of humanity's fleet began their slow, painstaking retreat toward the safety of the underground hangars. Repair crews were already being dispatched to the surface to patch the leaks in the crust and reinforce the defense batteries. The victory was hollow. They had pushed the enemy back, but the cost was visible in the columns of smoke rising from the colony sectors. Emma looked out at the horizon. She saw the ruins of the surface cities, the graveyard of things too large to understand. The realization hit her then, the same realization that Sam had in the old world, and Alara had on PX-47. Scale meant everything. They were small. They were tiny sparks in a very dark room. The universe was a chessboard, and they had only just survived the opening move. As the ship turned back toward Hangar 7, Alex looked out into the eternal blackness of space. He knew the peace they cherished was an illusion. The next encounter would be even more brutal. The universe's silence wasn't a comfort, it was a warning. It was an ominous promise that the chaos was never truly gone. Somewhere in the dark, unseen and patient, the enemy watched. They had seen the silver ships. They had felt the sting of the energy beam. And they would adapt. Emma sat back and closed her eyes, trying to remember the smell of fresh coffee and warm donuts. It felt like a lifetime ago. She knew that tomorrow, she might be back behind the counter, serving moments of normalcy to a terrified population. But she would keep her flight suit on under her apron, because the Shadow War was just beginning. And in a world of giants and voids, the only thing that mattered was the people small enough to care, and stubborn enough to keep fighting. The horizon was waiting, and this time, they wouldn't just watch it. They would be ready for whatever stepped across it next. End of story. Next step. This version is now heavily expanded for a long-form listening experience. Would you like me to generate a cinematic, cartoon-style image of the Void Runner Interceptor flying through the purple swarm choke? Sam came in all excited and set his discovery on the table. Dad, come and check this out. Sam was careful. He had found other things before and brought them home, but this was special, and he didn't know why. He just knew it, and to be careful about bumping it around too much. His father looked up from the water ledger and pushed his spectacles higher on his nose. If it's another shell from the East Gardens, your mother's not letting you keep it in the house this time. It's not a shell. Sam unwrapped the object from a square of old field cloth and set it in the center of the table between the lamp and the bread knife. It was a ring, no bigger around than the mouth of a jam jar, thin as a willow switch, silvery and smooth, with little ridges running all the way around its inside. It looked too exact to be natural, too clean to have come from the marsh flats or the hunting grounds. It gleamed in the lamplight with a strange, hard shine that reminded Sam of winter stars. His father's chair scraped against the floor. "Where did you get that?" "In the dry run near the western wall," Sam said, "where the stream used to split around the stones. I was looking for crawlbacks. The stream hasn't reached the western run in 6 days. I know, that's why I could get farther down. It was half buried in the silt." His father did not touch it right away. He had the rough, dark hands of a ditchkeeper, hands shaped by shovels and sluice gates and frozen pumps, and those hands hovered over the object as if it might be hot. "That's a retention collar," his father whispered. "It's from the systems." "The systems?" Sam's eyes widened. "Like the deep water pumps?" "No. Bigger. Much bigger." His father picked it up, and the metal pinged with a clear, bell-like tone as his fingernail brushed it. "This is from the old city. The one we're not supposed to go near. This belonged to the giants." Sam's breath hitched. He had seen the giants, of course, everyone in the settlement of Glassdown had. They moved through the high mist like slow, silent mountains, their heads lost in the clouds, their steps making the ground tremble for miles. They didn't seem to notice the people of Glassdown at all, any more than a farmer might notice the ants under his boots. Is it dangerous?" Sam asked. "It's dead," his father said. "Anything this small that came off a giant has been dead for a long time. They don't build like we do. They don't repair. They just exist. But if this came down the western run, it means something's breaking up in the high country." The conversation stopped as the door creaked open. Sam's mother entered, her apron dusted with flour, her face tired but alert. She saw the object immediately. "Eli, what is that?" "System scrap, Martha, from the giants." Sam found it in the dry run. Martha walked to the table and stared at the silvery ring. "The water's been failing for weeks, and now this shows up? It's an omen. We shouldn't have built in the bowl. We should have stayed in the lowlands." "The bowl is the only place the reservoir reaches," Eli said firmly. "If the giants are breaking, the reservoir might be the next thing to go. We need to know what's happening up there." That night, Sam couldn't sleep. He lay in his small bed, listening to the wind howl against the stone walls of their house. He thought about the ring, the silvery collar, and the giants. To the giants, that ring was probably a tiny screw or a washer, something so insignificant it wouldn't even be missed. But to Sam, it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. He thought about the scale of things. A giant's hand was larger than the town square. Their voices, when they did speak, which was rare, sounded like the grinding of tectonic plates, a low-frequency rumble that made people's teeth ache and the water in their jars ripple. 2 days later, the water in the reservoir dropped another foot. The ditch keepers were frantic. Without the water, the gardens would dry up, and Glassdown would starve. "I'm going up," Eli announced at the town meeting. A murmur of fear went through the crowd. "You can't go to the museum annex," the elder said, leaning on his staff. "No one goes to the City of the Giants. It's a graveyard of things too large to understand." "I'm not going to the city," Eli said. "I'm going to the reservoir spine. If the Giants' systems are failing, maybe I can find the blockage. Maybe I can find a way to keep our water flowing." "I'm coming with you," Sam said, standing up beside his father. Eli looked at his son. He saw the ring hanging from a cord around Sam's neck, a reminder of the world beyond the bowl. He saw the determination in the boy's eyes. "All right," Eli said. "You're fast, and you can see in the dark better than I can. But we stay quiet. We don't touch anything we don't have to." The climb was long and brutal. They left the bowl behind, ascending the steep, rocky slopes that led to the high country. As they climbed, the landscape changed. The trees became smaller, twisted by the high winds, until finally, they disappeared altogether. Then, they saw the wall. It was a sheet of metal that stretched up into the clouds, hundreds of feet high, curved like the hull of a ship but vast enough to be a mountain range. This was the reservoir spine, the outer casing of the Giants' water system. "Look," Sam whispered, pointing. A giant was there. It wasn't moving. It was sitting against the metal wall, its legs stretched out across the valley. Its head was bowed, chin resting on its chest. It looked like a man, but its skin was the color of weathered stone, and its clothes, if that's what they were, looked like sheets of overlapping titanium. "Is it sleeping?" Sam asked. "No," Eli said, his voice trembling. "It's dead. Look at the eyes." The giant's eyes were open, but they were dull and clouded, like frosted glass. Vegetation had already begun to grow in the crevices of its armor. A small waterfall spilled from a crack in the giant's shoulder, a leak in whatever internal system still functioned. They moved past the fallen giant, feeling like insects crawling across a statue. The scale was overwhelming. Every step they took covered only a fraction of the giant's boot. They found the blockage near the giant's hand. A massive piece of machinery, a gear the size of a house, had sheared off a nearby tower and fallen directly into the main sluice gate of the reservoir spine. "That's it," Eli said, pointing to the gear. "It's wedged. If we can move it even a few inches, the pressure will do the rest." "How?" Sam asked. "We're too small." Eli pulled a crowbar and a heavy hammer from his pack. "We don't move the gear. We break the pin holding the latch." For hours, they worked. The sound of their hammers against the giant metal pin was like a tiny ticking clock in a silent cathedral. They were so small, their efforts seemed futile. But then, something happened. A sound echoed from above. A low, rhythmic thrumming. Sam looked up. Another giant was approaching. This one was walking. Its steps were so heavy that Sam and his father were nearly knocked off their feet with every stride. It loomed over them, a shadow that blotted out the sun. "Get down," Eli hissed, pulling Sam into the shadow of the giant gear. The walking giant stopped. It looked down at the dead giant leaning against the wall. It stayed there for a long time, silent. Sam watched through a gap in the machinery. The giant's face was unreadable, not because it lacked expression, but because the features were so large it was impossible to see the whole emotion at once. It was like looking at a mountain range and trying to tell if it was happy. The giant reached out a hand. Its fingers were as long as Glassdown's Main Street. It gently touched the dead giant's shoulder, a gesture of mourning that lasted for minutes. Then, the giant noticed the gear. It looked down at the blockage. It looked at the pin Eli had been hammering. Sam held his breath. Would it crush them? Would it even see them? The giant's hand descended. A single finger, tipped with a nail as broad as a house, reached toward the gear. It didn't strike it. It simply flicked it. With a roar of grinding metal, the gear flew out of the sluice gate, tumbling down the mountain like a discarded toy. The water followed immediately. A torrent of white foam and blue power surged through the gate, filling the runoff channels that led down to the reservoir bowl. The giant didn't look at Sam or Eli. It didn't acknowledge their presence in any way. It simply turned and continued its slow, mountain-striding walk toward the horizon. "It helped us," Sam whispered, his heart pounding. "No," Eli said. looking at the rushing water. It didn't help us. It just cleaned up its world. It didn't even know we were here. They climbed down the mountain in silence. By the time they reached Glassdown, the reservoir was already beginning to rise. The town was celebrating, but Sam felt a strange, hollow sadness. He looked at the silvery ring around his neck. The realization hit him with the weight of a giant's footstep. The scale was too great. The giants were not gods, and they were not enemies. They were just large. So large that the exchange of knowledge was impossible. They lived in the same world, but they lived in different realities. That night, Sam stood on the edge of the reservoir and looked toward the high country. He could see the silhouettes of the giants moving against the stars. "We're the ants," he said to the wind. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He was just small, and in a world this large, being small was the only way to survive. Sam went back inside and sat at the table. He took the ring off his neck and set it down. "Dad?" "Yeah, son?" "The giant." It looked sad. Eli looked at the ring, then out the window at the flickering lights of the town. "Maybe, but if a mountain is sad, what does it matter to the grass at its feet?" Sam didn't have an answer. He just knew that the horizon was older than he'd ever imagined, and that somewhere out there, a giant was walking, and it didn't care about the water in the bowl at all. The movers, that was what the elders called them, continued their migration across the ridge. "They are leaving," Sam whispered. "They were never here to begin with," his father replied. The next morning, the water in the bowl was crystal clear, but the silence from the high country was louder than the rushing stream. The giants were gone, and Glassdown was alone in a world that had suddenly become far too large. Sam picked up the ring one last time. He walked to the edge of the dry run and threw it as far as he could. It didn't make a sound when it landed. "Goodbye," he said. The horizon said nothing back. It was just an old, empty horizon, and Sam was just a boy, and that was finally enough. Sam watched the sun dip below the jagged edge of the world, thinking about the city he had never seen and the giants who had lived there. He wondered if, somewhere in that vast, empty city, a giant child was looking for crawlbacks in a dry run, and if they ever found things that were too small to be real. He doubted it, but as he walked back to the house, he felt the ground beneath his feet, solid, real, and small enough to hold. That was the secret. The giants had the sky, but Sam had the ground, and the ground was where the water was. The realization that scale means everything, and there is a point that the difference cannot be resolved. Even the exchange of knowledge is futile. Sam entered the kitchen where his mother was setting the plates. "Did you find it, Sam?" "Find what, Mom?" "Whatever it was you were looking for out there." Sam sat down and reached for a piece of bread. "No," he said, "I think it was already found." Outside, the first star of the evening appeared, hanging over the reservoir spine like a silver retention collar, lost in the deep, unbridgeable dark. Sam ate his bread and listened to the sound of the water. It was a small sound, but it was his. The end. Wait, there's more. Sam looked up at the ceiling. "Dad?" "Yeah? What happens when the water runs out again?" His father stopped eating. He looked at the water ledger on the corner of the table. "We'll do what we've always done, Sam. We'll look for the leaks, even if they're too big to fix, especially then, because in a world of giants, the only thing that mattered was the things small enough to care about." The movers did not return, but the water kept flowing, and for Sam, that was the greatest realization of all. Scale didn't matter if you were the one holding the cup. The cup was full, and the horizon was just a line he would cross one day, step by small, determined step. Because even the giants had to start somewhere, even if that somewhere was too far back to remember. Sam closed his eyes and saw the giant's hand again. It wasn't a mountain, it was just a hand. And a hand could be reached. One day, maybe, but for now, there was the bread, and the lamp, and the sound of the water in the bowl. And that was